Muy buenas a todos y bienvenidos a una nueva entrevista de Primera Categoría. En esta ocasión tenemos con nosotros nada más y nada menos que a uno de los representantes de la UCI, en este caso de las carreras que no se disputan en carretera. Mr. Simon Burney, UCI Off-Road Manager. Welcome to Primera Categoría.
Hi, thanks for having
me. For those who don't know about your role, what does it consist on?
So right now I'm the manager of the off-road team at the UCI. So off-road comprises of mountain bike, and then within mountain bike there's a lot of different categories of mountain bike. So there's cross country, downhill, marathon, eliminator, enduro. Lots of different mountain bike disciplines. Then also cyclocross, BMX racing, BMX freestyle, and trials. So it's a team. The off-road team is 10 people in total. There's a coordinator for each discipline. So one for mountain bike, one for BMX racing, one for freestyle, one for trials, one for cyclocross. And then there's 4 people in the office that are helping the coordinators to with the logistics and the administration.
You have been a lot of different things, rider, mechanic, team manager, TV commentator, and now working with the UCI. What's left for you to do?
Yeah, definitely. So I started out as a racer. Then I went into team management firstly with professional mountain bike teams, and also a little bit cyclocross. And then I worked for the Great Britain National Federation for 3 Olympic cycles, so Sydney, Athens, Beijing, as the performance manager for off-road. And then I started doing some work for the UCI after Beijing, so 2008, but just as a consultant role, and mainly as the technical delegate for the cross-country mountain bike events. And I did that until last year. I was just working as a consultant, just a certain number of days a year. And then last year, November 2019, I started actually employed by the UCI as the manager of the off-road team.
In the last few years, we have more and more top cyclists that race both cyclocross and road cycling. Do you think this is helping to promote the discipline among the fans?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's bringing a new audience to mountain bike that maybe didn't ever have an opportunity to see it, or didn't think it was a sport for them. So a lot of Northern European countries really like cyclocross. So Belgium, the Netherlands, the Czech Republic, and it's such a really popular discipline, cyclocross, and there's some the support for it and the television for it is very, very strong. And I think with an opportunity to have riders like Mathieu van der Poel, Tom Pidcock, that have made the switch to road racing and mountain bike, then it just takes a whole new audience to the different disciplines. So I think the cyclocross audience, they tend to also know road racing, but they don't really know mountain biking. So it's been really really interesting to see that change of audience, but it's really positive. And I think the quality of the mountain bike riders, the quality of the level of mountain bike is very high. So for those guys, they're super successful on the road in cyclocross, and they've come into mountain bike at a good level, so podium level, but not necessarily winning every single race, which has been good. There's still some competition from in the men's racing, from Nino Schurter, Matthias Fukiga, Henrique Avancini. So it's been really good to have new names and to more competition and a more depth of competition in those races. And I think in the women's racing, it's been similar. We've had riders. There's been more crossover in women's racing generally, so more women do more disciplines. So a rider like Marianne Vos, for example, she's been a great road racer, a great cyclocross racer. She's done some mountain biking, and then crossing over the other way. So like Yolanda Neff, can go from, she started as a mountain biker, but then she has done some cyclocross, been really successful. Evie Richards, the same. And then you'll see them on the road as well. So it's been it's a start of a new generation of riders that can turn their ability to any cycling. And it's, for me, it's really, really exciting, and it's really helped the off-road sports.
It's not an easy thing to combine these different disciplines so as good as you will say Tom Pidcock or Matthew Van Der Poel. But do you think taking their example, we'll see in the next year, new riders doing the same and combining cyclocross, mountain bike, and road cycling as well as they do today?
I'm sure some people will try. I think, but I think it's very difficult to do it. I think you need to be very talented, first of all, but you need to be very, very good at planning your year. You have to be able to target specific races and not try to do everything. If you're going to race 12 months a year, whether that's on the road and cyclocross or mountain bike and cyclocross, you need to be very, very strict about when you're going to get into good shape, when you're going to take a break, when you can rest. It's a very hard thing to do, and the planning is the most important part of that. Once you add in a third discipline, so if you're trying to mix in the summer mountain bike and road racing, then you need to look at the balance of being able to compete at a high level in, say, a mountain bike World Cup. But then between the World Cups, if you want to still try to race on the road or represent a team on the road or your sponsors on the road, then it's really difficult, because it's quite a different style of racing. It requires different levels of fitness. Obviously, somebody like Van der Poel or Pidcock, they're incredibly fit and they can go from one to the other quite easily. But if you spend too much time doing one, then it takes away from your ability to do the other one at a very high level. I think a lot of mountain bikers, and for sure a lot of cyclocross riders, they do road racing, but more for training, more to get them into shape. If they can maybe do a short stage race, it's very good preparation, but it's different. It's a different attitude doing it for preparation than it is to do it to try to win it. And I think that's the difference that we're seeing with Pidcock and Van der Poel and Marianne Vos and Yolanda Neff, that they can do it, but they can still win. They're not finishing, 50th and just doing it for training. So I think that's the difference. So I think more riders will maybe follow the example of those, really talented athletes and try it, but it'll be hard for everybody to succeed, for sure.
Well, the Olympics are getting closer. Is everything ready to see the riders give everything for the medals? Are you excited about this?
I'm really, really excited for the races. I'm not excited at all for the travel and all the COVID protocols that we have to go through. But for the races, I think it's going to be incredible. I think we've got a really, really good course to race the mountain bike race on. I think it's the best course that we've seen at an Olympics since the sport was in the Olympics in 1996. It's a really, really good course. It's a nice venue. I hope still that mountain bike is going to be lucky enough to have some spectators, because a lot of the sports that are in the city of Tokyo, it's going to have to be with no spectators. But because the mountain bike venue is 2.5 hours away out of the city right now, and it's changing. It's changing a couple of times in the last 2 weeks. But right now we've got half of the original spectator numbers, which will be 5,500. So if we can do that, then yeah, we've got enough spectators to make an atmosphere at the event, and I think the races are going to be really good because there isn't one favourite. And I think in the last few years we've had, or the last few Olympics, there's always been a really strong favourite. In the last few years, it's Nino Schurter for sure. The last two Olympics, we had Coolharvey for the men in London. The women maybe changed a little bit the last two Olympics. There wasn't a clear favourite, but certainly I think going into next week, and it starts next week, I think there's maybe four guys and honestly 4 or 5 women that could win. So it'll be one of the most exciting races that we've seen for a few years.
We have road cycling and mountain bike in the Olympics, but do you think cyclocross should be in the Winter Olympics? I
think it should be. I think it's a very difficult thing to make it happen. But yeah, we keep trying, and we keep trying to add new events into the Summer Olympics, and we're also looking at ways to get events into the Winter Olympics as well. We were very hopeful that we could get the short track mountain bike event into the Paris Olympics in 2024, but unfortunately the IFC didn't accept, or Paris didn't accept any new sports at all. So it wasn't just a problem for mountain bike. It was no new events were accepted. The problem or the difficulty with adding new sports or new events to the Olympics is the athlete numbers. It's very difficult to put an event in without taking something away. And with cycling, as we've seen with the inclusion of BMX racing and BMX freestyle, we had to use athlete numbers from within cycling. So then we had to take some riders away from mountain bike and away from the track and away from road racing to add the riders for the BMX events. So that's the difficulty that we faced, because there's a very strict limit on the number of athletes that can compete in the Olympics. And then the other thing is that the Olympics is just becoming more and more expensive. So the addition of sports that add a big cost is very difficult to do as well, which was one of the reasons that we were so hopeful with short track, because with short track, we didn't need to add rider numbers because we could use the same athletes that were there for cross country. We didn't need a new venue because we had the cross country venue. We had the same start and finish. We just needed a slightly shorter course. But even with all those things in our favour, we still weren't able to add short track. So I think for cyclocross, right now, the IOC charter for the Winter Olympics states that for a sport to be included, it must need to have snow or ice for the sport to take place. And that's not the situation with cyclocross. For cyclocross, it can happen on snow and it can happen on ice, but it doesn't need it for the sport to happen. So right now there's the IAAF, the running federation, and the UCI for cycling are both trying to see if it's possible to get that part of the charter changed. Then running could get maybe cross country running, and cycling could include cyclocross. But yeah, certainly for the next Olympics, that's not going to happen. But we'll keep trying.
Also, you mentioned that there are many favorites for the upcoming Olympics. We have to ask you, who do you mark as the favorites for the BMX and mountain bike competitions?
For the BMX, honestly, I'm not really the expert. So it's a hard one for me to predict. I think for mountain bike, I'm certainly more knowledgeable because I'm at all the races. BMX, I don't go to the events at all. So the BMX coordinator does that. But for mountain bike, I'm at all the World Cups, so I'm a little bit more involved in it. I think for mountain bike, in the women's race, for sure, Loana Leconte is the favourite because she's been incredible this year. She hasn't been beaten in the World Cup, and she's she's performing at a really, really high level. But I think behind her, there's, Pauline Ferrand-Prévot, Yolanda Neff, Evie Richards, Antauber. There's a few women that could really push her for the gold medal. In the men's race, I think everybody's thinking that the two favourites will be Tom Pidcock and Mathieu van der Poel. But I think Nino Schurter and Matthias Flückiger will be very, very competitive. I think Flückiger right now is in really good shape, and I think Nino Schurter's had a difficult start to his season, but I think we'll see him really be competitive. I think he hasn't taken not winning the World Cups lightly this year, so I think he's preparing really well for Tokyo. It's going to be very hot and very humid, and I think that'll help some people like Nino. I think he likes it when it's hot, and I think it'll be a disadvantage to some people, maybe like Van der Poel, who body type and preferences is more for the cold weather, the wet weather, more than maybe 35 degrees and humid. So I think the weather will definitely affect the race. It's a very hard course as well. It's a lot of steep climbing. And I think steep climbing in those temperatures is very difficult because you get zero cooling from the wind, and you're working really hard. So it'll definitely have a big effect, I think. But I think for me, obviously, I'm British. Tom Pidcock would be great to see him. We haven't had an Olympic medalist in mountain biking from Great Britain, but I think. If my heart says Pidcock, I think my head says Van der Poel. And in the women, maybe the other way around. I think my head probably says LeConte because she's been unbeatable, but I think Ferrand-Prévot will be very, very good as well. So I think, both races, no clear favourite, I don't think, but should provide some really interesting racing.
In 2023, Glasgow will host the biggest cycling event in the world, with the World Championships of many different cycling disciplines. This might increase the visibility of the off-road races. Don't you think?
Yeah, I hope so. I think it's a really exciting new model to try right now. The plan is to try it every 4 years, but it's a very, very big project, certainly for the organisers, and even for the UCI, because it's everything happening in 10 days. And the different venues and the different sports and the different events. It's a really exciting project, and I think one thing it will do is encourage people to watch cycling events that they maybe haven't seen before. I'm sure there'll be, whether it's spectators at the events in person or watching on the television, I think it'll be a really good opportunity for people to try to see things that are new. So the opportunity to go watch the road race, but then the day after, watch the BMX or go to see a mountain bike marathon world championships or the paracycling. It's I think it's a really nice new addition to the World Championships. I'm looking forward to it.
And what do you think about the Spanish off-road cycling? Because here we have, for example, riders like Felipe Orts in cyclocross, who is very dominating in Spain. But when he gets to the international stage, it's very difficult for him to get into the better results. Do you think Spain can reach the top tier countries?
Definitely, yes. I think you chose an example there of an individual rider who's trying to be the best he can be in his discipline, which is Felipe in cyclocross. But cyclocross is very unique in that all the big races are all in Belgium or the Netherlands, and to be an outsider, whether it's from Spain or from Great Britain or from Switzerland, to try to break into that sport, it's so difficult because it's so ingrained in the Belgian lifestyle. It's their biggest sport after football. It's their biggest sport. They get, you know, 1 million people watching each race at the weekend live on the television, and there's tens of thousands of people that go to the race every weekend to watch it. And to try to be a foreigner in that country to do it, it takes a lot of dedication, a lot of sacrifices, and it's very difficult to do it from another country. So for, you know, I know Felipe spends a lot of time in Belgium. I don't know his circumstances, whether he lives with a Belgian family or whether he's living in a hotel or how he's working it. But I know a lot of people that have tried, especially Americans that have come over from to live in Belgium to try to do it. A lot of British people try, and it's very, very difficult. But that doesn't mean that the ability of the rider is any less than the ability of the Belgian. So Felipe, when he's on a good day, he's as good as the best 5 Belgians, you know, in the race. But the depth in those competitions is very, very strong, and it's a hard one to break into. I think in the other off-road disciplines, I think in mountain bike, it's you know, you've had some big success. You know, you had a medal at the last Olympics in the men's race, which was incredible. And historically, in the history of mountain biking, you've had some really, really strong competitors. Again, you know, Jose Antonio Hermida, Marga Fiana. There's been some really, really good World Cup winners, world champions, Olympic medalists. So I think the strength in off-road in Spain is probably in mountain bike. And again, you know, things like trials. Obviously, I look after the trials events for the UCI, and you know, Spain is really strong in trials competition as well. So you know, it's a very strong cycling nation, Spain, and it's obviously it's a big country. There's a lot of different you know, different areas, and it's maybe difficult for everybody to come together to compete at the same event. But internationally, I think Spain has always been one of the leading nations, and has definitely made a mark in off-road cycling.
Yes, traditionally in Spain, the most popular cycling event is the road cycling, especially with climbing riders. But there is something that is changing now, and we have more variety of different riders. I think that it's something similar like other countries around the world.
Yeah, definitely, and you've also got some really good teams as well in off-road. I think your mountain bike teams are very strong. You've got good support from the cycling industry in Spain and from Spanish sponsors, and I think it's I think you're as strong as anybody out there. Maybe the Swiss in mountain bike are probably dominant and the strongest, but you know, the French, the Spanish are certainly, you know, the next nations. And I think that shows with you know, with the riders that you've been able to have selected for the Olympic Games, and for the strength of your competitors in the World Championships across all the disciplines. So certainly, you know, off-road is becoming more, not necessarily more popular, but more focused with teams and sponsors, as it becomes a little bit harder to race on the road in certain countries, because of it's harder to close roads to have races, and it's harder to keep road calendars going. But I think in those countries, then the emphasis can switch to off-road racing. And I think, you know, in the next few years we'll see an increase in gravel racing, for example, because it's safer. You know, you don't have to close roads. It's a little bit easier. It's a bit cheaper. You know, and I think that, in addition to mountain bike, I think in Spain there's a really big popularity in mountain bike marathon races, mountain bike stage races. So you know, there's a lot of different types of cycling going on in Spain. So I think it's the road is still strong, and the Vuelta is still a huge event, and you've still got not as many maybe Spanish road teams as you had, 10 or 20 years ago, but certainly road is still the majority sport of cycling in most European countries. But off-road is catching up.
And just to end, we want to talk about the future. What are the UCI plans for the next years to develop the different off-road cycling?
Well, I just mentioned gravel racing there, and I think gravel racing is something that's become really popular in the last few years, and I think it's probably grown quickly in America, but it started also to have gravel events in Europe. And that's something certainly that we're working on for next year. So there'll be a gravel series, UCI series. There'll be a gravel calendar, some kind of regulations to so that federations can have gravel racing on their calendar. So I think that's probably the next big one. In mountain bike, we're looking at. You mentioned trying to get other events in the Olympics. We're actually going to start working on a snow bike discipline where we would try to get the downhill riders with some competitions in the winter, racing on the snow. And I think that's our best opportunity to try to get a cycling event in the Winter Olympics. So, I think if we can get that off the ground and have a few demonstration events in next winter. It's been delayed a little bit by the COVID situation in the last winter, but we're certainly working on that in a similar kind of style to dual eliminator in downhill. So 2 riders compete against each other, and then the fastest one goes through to the next round. That style of racing, but on snow. I think the downhill community, they don't have a lot of races in the summer. The World Cup is the biggest, certainly the biggest focus for them. But outside of the World Cup, there's not a lot of downhill races on the calendar. So that those guys and girls that compete, if we can give them something in the winter as well, then it gives them more opportunities to represent their sponsors and their teams. And like I say, if we can try to give them a way to get into the Olympics, then it opens the door for a lot of funding from national Olympic associations to fund Olympic disciplines. So if downhill through snow bike could do that, then it might give an opportunity for federations to get some funding and to be able to develop that side of this gravity side of the sport. Apart from that, I don't think any big changes. I think mountain bike, traditional cross-country racing is in a pretty good place right now with the introduction of the short track. Again, we'll keep trying to push to get short track in the Summer Olympics in 2028. We're going to hopefully introduce a short track World Cup hopefully from next year. Cyclocross, well, the biggest change there is the World Cup. It's increasing to a 16-round World Cup, which is the World Cup now is organised by Flanders Classics in Belgium on behalf of the UCI under license. So they've increased the number of rounds. BMX, we're looking at just recently actually been looking at ways to kind of change the format of BMX a little bit to make it a little bit more exciting for television viewers, to kind of make it a little bit shorter, a little bit faster. The kind of the basic concept of BMX racing is really good, but to go from the round of 64 to the final, it takes quite a long time. So we're looking at different ways if we could change that. We've got some nice ideas for BMX in the future. So yeah, I think off-road traditionally has been a sport or a side of the cycling sport that changes quite quickly. We're always seeing new mountain bike disciplines coming, whether it's stage races or marathons. Enduro has grown really quickly. There's been 24-hour racing. There's been all sorts of different things in mountain biking, and I think it's a discipline that can change. and we need to kind of move quite quickly to make sure that we're following the changes when they happen.
Mr. Burney, thank you so much for talking with us, and good luck in Tokyo, and have a nice trip.
Thanks very much. It's been a pleasure, and thank you.